So program oral interp, what is POI? POI is a competitive event in speech and debate where participants create a presentation by weaving together selections of various literature work. POI should focus on making an interesting argument that is supported in different ways by each pieces of literature that is selected. Now, POI, unlike different like other interps like DI or HI, is a combinations of different literature works compared to DI or HI, which is just one like cutting. You can have poetry, prose, you can have a DI, a book, anything. It just has to have a transcript that is like the original role. It has to have a published transcript that everyone has access to, and that's how where you get your literature for POI. Now a POI binder, unlike other interps, POI does require a binder. Now this binder can be used. It has one of the rules that I think a lot of people don't know with NSDA is that in POI, your manuscript has to be in your binder. And I think a lot of people don't know this or not taught this, but actually, if you do not have a manuscript of your performance in this binder, you actually can get disqualified. And I have seen it happen before. So the binder essentially serves a purpose as a prop or for blocking. So it's very interesting to see the way kids get really like creative with their blockings to use their binders to show different elements to add to their story and add to their narrative. So an introduction. I think most people should know what an introduction is. An introduction just like it comes right after your teaser in a POI. It is the only part of your script that has to be memorized. You should not be looking inside of your binder for your introduction. It looks very unclean and prepared when kids do that. And while it's technically not a rule that it should be memorized, when you do that, when you look into your binder during your performance, it gives off that you're not very prepared. It's just not a clean look. Your introduction should be a moment where you get to connect with your audience, because generally when you do a POI performance, you're technically saying other people's story. You're sharing the stories of other people that relate to you. So during your introduction, it's your time to now connect with your audience, connect with your judges, tell them why this topic or this piece is so important to you. And it's just such an important moment in a piece that I honestly think has been overshadowed. This is the one moment that you get to be yourself. Because in POI, you are not playing yourself, you are playing characters. And we'll get into characters later. So your introduction is one of the only moments where you just get to be yourself. Tell us why this is important to you. Tell us why we should care about this, right? And just basic things for when you're doing your introductions to make it more effective are when you give quotes and statistics, facts, and you start off your like introduction with that, it makes your introduction a lot more credible, especially when it's something that is a societal issue to show it like, oh, this has impact. Now after you then give your stack to explain why this stack is then important and how it applies to your audience and your thesis, which we'll get into later. NPOI, because you do use multiple different like sources and literature, is very, very important to give the authors like credit for using their work. So in your introduction, you list out the like authors and where you got the pieces from, just to like give out credit. That is, I'm pretty sure, like a rule in NSDA that you have to give out like the authors. So we can also check, like some people fake their sources. So some judges can be a little stickler on that and just like want to like fact check you and look up a source. And if your sources aren't real, you will get disqualified. So yeah. And affirmation. This is something that when I leave around, I should be thinking of, wow, if I can't remember anything else of your piece, I should be able to remember the last thing of that you said in your intro, because that should 100% be solely personality. It's like a tagline that you give right before you go into your piece. It should be something memorable, something you care about. And of all the POIs I have watched so far, I think this intro that I'm about to play for you has one of the most structured intros I have ever heard. Isabella Royer, if you know her, you do. She's an amazing performer, and we're going to watch her intro real quick to just give you guys a brief like explanation and example of what a good intro should look like. So yeah.
Our country was built off of the basis of freedom. Each amendment incorporated into the state. However, these amendments do not protect children. It is the job of parents, adults, educators, and legislators to make change for our student body. Why then? have we seen no advancement in legislation. Because the reality is, funding doesn't remove guns from the hands of mass shooters. And Texas Governor Greg Abbott banning drag.
I'm on a POI. I need to talk.
Are you muted?
No, stop.
You know, I thought we lived in United States of America, the U.S. of action. But as of now, we are living in a U.S. of distraction, and it is our job to stand up, speak up, and make you listen. So, using the poems, Chambers of a Gun by Zane Langlois, Can't You Hear by Alison Sheehy, Life Doesn't Frighten Me at All by Maya Angelou, Another School Shooting by Mary Zollers, and The Rude Awakening by Savannah Nemeth. The Stories, The Three Little Pigs by Avril Lethbridge, and The Shot That Killed Innocents by Christy Thomas, along with the 37th Military Battalion's Operator's Manual to an AK-47 assault rifle, comes the program. Can you hear the screams now? Dedicated to all of the victims of the Robb Elementary shooting, only 195 miles away from my high school. Victims like Tess Mata, 10 years old, who loved to dance and wanted to be TikTok famous. Hear our screams.
Yeah, okay. So that is one of my like favorites, like intros that I've ever seen, because I think she does a very good job of covering the bases. She gives stats about gun control. The affirmation she gives at the ends about hearing our scream, the call to action, perfect like example of what a good and structured intro should look like. And then we're going to go into blocking. Now, this really goes with almost all like interp events, but this is very particular for POI because in POI, you do have to use your binder as blocking. While it is not in the rule, it does make your piece look a million times like better when you have blocking because that's what the binder is technically there for, is to help bring your characters and your stories to life. We've gotten the benefit of just being able to use that. And I think blocking is amazing, right? So blocking is planned movements, gestures, and positioning of the performer during their presentation. Blocking is used to enhance the visual aspect of performance and create a dynamic and interesting stage presence. I think a lot of things that kids have forgotten nowadays is that your blocking should add to your performance and should not take away from your performance, right? It's very easy to get overwhelmed with, oh, I want to do this, I want to move my binder like this because you have it, but you should never let your blocking take away from the story, take away from your performance. Now, this very, very beautiful and talented girl right here is Manha Hawk. She went to Plano West. She was a finalist in 2004, 2023, sorry, and she has amazing blocking. And I want you guys to notice how she uses her binder to depict different objects and how she uses it to add to her story rather than distract the audience with it. And I think she does a very good job with blocking in this. So I'm just gonna go ahead and play this.
Oh, the woman on the plane, I know she wasn't trying to take it over, but she was wearing a scarf. No, around her head. Now, scarf around head is way scarier than scarf around the neck. Oh, allow me to demonstrate. This right here is a standard scarf. This is good. This is not good. You know, this right here says fun. This is scary. You know, this right here says, I'm Audrey Hepburn gallivanting around the plaza. And this says, I'm here to kill Audrey Hepburn as she gallivants around the plaza. 6 inches. That's it.
Okay, so as we just saw, she used her binder as a scarf. And I think that is one of the smartest ways I've honestly seen a binder be used. And she does it well. She does it so it's like very obvious so our audience knows what she's doing. Because I think a lot of time kids do things with binders and they don't block with purpose. A lot of things I've noticed nowadays, but especially POI, when you make a POI and you want to add blocking, you block with purpose. You don't just block because, oh, I want to move. Your blocking needs to have a meaning and it has to serve a purpose. If not, you're just moving around and it's very distracting and it's not cute. Okay. So when you want to block, especially with your binder, you block with purpose. We as the audience, without you telling us what you just did, should be able to know what you just did. And then if that's not possible, then you have lost your audience. And the moment your audience starts to get confused on what you're doing, you've officially failed at communicating. Because this whole activity as a whole, like in speech and debate, the whole purpose of this activity is to communicate. So the moment you are not able to properly communicate anything, you're not doing your job properly. And I think that's a very important keynote to like discuss when you're doing POI. Next up, we have characterizations. Now, remember I said in the beginning, POI is just like a big long DI basically, or a big interpretation piece with multiple different like aspects of literature. And because there are multiple different aspects of literature, it is very, very important for you to differentiate between these characters in your piece. You do not want a POI with 5 different characters that all sound the same and all look the same and all walk the same and all talk the same, because it's get very confusing, because a POI is normally of like built of different stories. So it sounds really weird if I was a doctor and one of my characters was a doctor and another one of my characters was a nursery school teacher and they both talked the same and sounded the same. That would be very confusing for the audience, because then it's just a 10-minute piece of the same character, which is basically just a DI or an HI. One of my favorite parts of POI is that you get to play so many different characters, but it's very, very important that you are able to differentiate each characters, meaning each character should stand differently, talk differently, look differently, just carry themselves differently, because then it adds to the aspect of just building from like, it's like a Lego. Like think of these characters as Legos to build into one complete piece. So characterization reveals the personality of a character through delivery, vocals, and facial expressions. Through varying levels of levity and intensity. All your characters should not sound the same. They should not have the same vocal ranges or vocal levity. This honestly has to be one of the trickiest parts of POI, because it is very difficult for kids to just snap in and out of different characters. But I promise the more you practice, the easier it becomes. I will give you a hint and say one of the most common ways to show characterization from what I've seen is to put on a Southern accent. I think that's one thing that almost every interp kid has in their POI at some point, is to just have a character with a Southern accent, because it sounds very different. And I think it's one of the easiest accents to just put on. So now we're going to watch Debate Like a Girl, because she does a very, very good job in characterization, because you are able to see all the different characters that she has within this one short segment. And she does a very good job at maintaining these different characters throughout the 10-minute duration of her piece. So we're just going to go ahead and watch her performance.
On an island of music, in a city of drum beats, the drum girl dreamed of pounding tall conga drums, tapping small bongo drums, and boom, boom, booming with long, loud sticks. Welcome to the second presidential debate. Secretary Clinton, knowing that educators assign doing the debates as homework, do you feel you're modeling appropriate behavior for today's youth? Well, thank you. I think that's a very good question, because, thank you, Secretary Clinton, you're out of time. Being a female debater, I get interrupted all the time. Male debaters are often encouraged to talk louder when someone interrupts them. But females are taught to say things like, excuse me, may I finish my point?
Okay, so do we all notice how she played like 4 different characters in a span of 1 minute. And I think she did a very good job at making sure every single character she played was distinct, from whether it was Trump to the high school debater or Hillary Clinton. None of those could have ever been mixed up because they all had different voices. They all stand differently. They all had different intonation in their voices, like their vocal ranges. She did a great job in characterization. And honestly, if you're going to take away one thing from this whole lesson, it should be the importance of characterization, because you can use it outside of just POI. DI calls for interpret like characterization. HI especially calls for characterization, and it is such a very key like aspect of just interp in general. And because you have the binder, it gives you a lot more opportunity to move around to show differences in your characters. Now we're going to talk about a POI structure. Now, compare all interps should technically have the exact same structure of the Freytag model. I think this is something that's not taught a lot in a lot of interp classes, but I think this is one of the most basic and important information you need, not just to even do POI, but for almost everything, expect even platform events, you need to have a Freytag model. A Freytag model is used in your TV shows, your movies, your poems, your books. They all follow this specific pyramid, and it is very important that we understand what each like levels of the pyramid needs. Now, your exposition, this can be like your teaser. It sets the scene and gives background information of what your characters are like. That's why I say it's your teaser, because your teaser is just a taste of what the entire 10 minutes performance is going to be like, right? And then you have your inciting incident. It sets the conflict in motion and represents the beginning of the rising action. So when things start to get tenser, tension starts to build, you start to get a little angrier, starts to get a little louder. That's when your inciting incident happens. And then your rising action, slow builds before your climax. Your voice is getting louder, the emotion is becoming more intense, and then you hit your climax. Your climax has to be the greatest intensity of your entire piece. If I need to be blown away in any part of your piece, it needs to be your climax, right? And then we have your falling action. This comes after your climax. This is just, we've built, and now you're at the top. You cannot go any further, so you have to start coming down. This is where the character resolve their conflicts, your emotion is starting to come back down, right? And then we get the resolution. This is the end of your piece. And I will, in the next slide, it has the structural component of what a POI for every minute should go for, right? And the reason why this doesn't go exactly to 10 minutes is because I don't ever think your piece should be running 10 minutes, because time is a big thing in POI. It's so easy to get just like forget about time because you're so in your performance, and I want y'all to be in your performance, just not enough to go over time, because getting over time will get you in a lot of trouble depending on what state you are. But I do know for Texas, getting overtime immediately means you can't get the one, and I would hate for someone to not be able to get a one after you just give a performance of a lifetime. So your teaser, this is their beginning of your piece, should technically be from like 0 minutes to 1:30. That's a good time for you to set basis of what each character like means and what their story is. Just a little taste of what this 10-minute piece is going to be about. And then your intro is where you establish your argument, and we will get into what an argument is later on, but this is where you tell us like, what is your argument, what are you trying, what is this piece about, why is this piece important to you, why should we as the audience care about this? I think that is so important when you are able to relate your argument and your piece to everyone in the audience. So that means, so it gives the audience a connection to your piece, right? It's because if we are able to care about what you're saying, it gives us a lot more room to really connect with you and feel the emotions that you're feeling as like a performer. And then we have your exposition. This comes after your intro, and this is just you introducing your characters, their settings, their conflicts, introducing just the basics of your characters. Just think about this like a teaser 2.0. It's just like adding to your teaser things you couldn't get out in your teaser, you're getting it now. Now this is your inciting incident. It goes from 3:30 to 4 minutes. It should not be that long. This is where we just find out what the conflict is in your piece. What is the problem in your piece? This is where we should find out. And then your rising action typically takes the longest. This is the longest part of your piece because a notion I've like one of my favorite coaches always used to tell me is that your POI is basically like a roller coaster. It starts off slow and then it starts to build. It starts to build and it starts to build and then it goes down, right? It should always feel like you're going on a roller coaster of emotion, right? So your rising action is just that build. You're building to your climax. You're getting angry. You're getting sadder. Emotions are starting to get heightened and the tensions are just booming everywhere. And then you get to your climax. Your climax, a major mistake I've seen a lot of kids make while doing their climax is that a lot of people think for you to have an effective climax, you need to get loud, you need to yell, you need to cry, you need to, no, you don't. I think a lot of people think that's the most effective way to get a climax and get emotion and portray emotion. And honestly, I was one of those kids that thought, oh, if I yell louder, it'll seem like I have a lot more emotion. But there are so many better ways to express emotions without yelling, without screaming. Because I honestly think the best way to portray emotion is silence. Soak in the silence. Let us give us the audience just a moment to just soak in everything that has happened in your rising action. A quiet climax is a deadly one. I will tell you that. Being able to sit there and just portray emotion without yelling at the top of your lungs, because I assure you, those judges just watched six kids do the exact same climax with the exact same yell, right? So your goal is to stand out. Watching some climaxes with like, just like where they're able to connect with the audience and just have a one-on-one conversation has to be one of the most powerful climaxes I've seen. It doesn't have to be loud. You don't have to be angry. You just need to be able to properly express your emotion and have the audience like understand the emotion you're trying to express. That is your climax. It's the emotional peak of your performance, not the loudest part of your performance, right? And then your denouement, your falling action. This typically is the end. This is the reaction to the climax. This is where the story comes to an end, unfortunately, right? It goes from 8 minutes to 9:30. Now, the reason why like it's spaced out the way it is and we have like a good minute at the end is because, like I said, one of the most important part of like any performance, period, and I think has gone so like it's lost its touch and interp is silence. Silence is so important in almost any performance. We as the audience, because think about this, for 10 minutes, you are going to be spitting information at us. You're going to be crying. You're going to be going through so much emotion that it is so important for you to just give your audience time to be like, wow, right? I think that is such like, even for as a performer, you need to give yourself time to just process these emotions, right? Because I think a lot of time we get into a habit of just performing. Like you've done this performance probably like 15 times already at some point, right? I think it's so important to like understand that this is your audience's first time watching you give this performance. This is their first time watching this story unfold. So although you've probably like listened to yourself give this piece like 15 times, your audience, this is their first time watching this. So they need a moment to process what they're watching. So when you're sitting here just spreading your entire POI and not giving them a moment of silence, a moment of just, just to really take everything in, it loses its impact. I think some of the greatest, like, especially comes after your intro, when you make such a powerful statement and then you just take a beat. One Mississippi, two Mississippi, go. That's the slightest difference that I've seen that makes such a huge impact within like the duration of the rest of your performance is silence. And that's why it's spread out like this. So it gives you little moments to just calm down. Really think about the emotions that you're going to really be in your performance and just have a moment of just silence, a brief pause, so we can digest all the information you just gave to us, right? And next, we're going to go into our arguments in POI, right? I think for a lot of kids, especially if you're a debater in here. I think you should have like a basic floor structure of what an argument is. And I will say, from what I've learned from my coach, from like a lot of times, almost every event in this activity all technically have the same baseline of communication and argumentation, right? And argumentation in POI is something I find to be one of the most important parts of a POI, because for the last like couple minutes, we've talked about what it's things you need to perform a POI, whether it's your characterization or your blocking. These are just things that are performance wise. Now we're going to talk about actually making a POI, right? Because a good performer, if you're a good performer, it will take you far. But if you have a good piece that is well argumentative and you are a good performer, it will take you even farther. So what is an argument? An argument is a set of statements or reason put forward to support or oppose a particular point of view. An argument provides a clear direction and purpose to your performance or speech, right? Ensuring that your message is coherent and easy for your audience to follow. Without an argument, your piece has no purpose. That is something that is very important. Without an argument, your piece not only not has a purpose, it also doesn't have a message. If you can think about it in any way, just think of your argument as your message. What are you trying to teach your audience? I will give you this abbreviation because I think it is something that changed the way I see this activity as a whole. It's called know, think, feel. And these are three important questions you need to ask yourself when making a piece. What do I want my audience to know by the end of this piece? What are the information I want my audience to know, right? What do I want my audience to think about all these informations I've given them? Do you want them to, if you make a piece about cats, right? You would want your audience to know that cats have 4 legs, right? What do you want your audience to think about cats? Do I want my audience to think like, wow, cats are horrible, right? Is that what you want your audience to know? And finally, what do you want your audience to feel at the end of your performance? Do you want your audience to feel bad for all cats that ever lived? Do you want your audience to hate all cats that ever lived? That is something that is very important, because if you know what you want your audience to know, what you want them to think, what you want them to feel, it gives you a better set of direction of what literature you are going to pick, right? So without an argument, your piece has no purpose. It doesn't have a clear message and it does not have a purpose, right? So now we're going to get into actually, building an argument, right? In every argument, there is a claim, a warrant, and an impact. For those that do debate, I think this is something that you should have heard before, right? So what is a claim? A claim starts with a clear, concise statement that outlines the main point of position. This is what you're arguing against or for, right? This is just the overarching message of what you want to send out to your audience. For example, this is a claim that I used like my junior year for high school for my POI. And my claim was basically that when people seek out validation, it causes us to change who we are so we can then get that validation. Now, your warrant is what makes your piece credible, right? It's very important to make your piece credible. You've seen a lot of final round like POIs when they start quoting in like articles, when they start putting in stats. This is to make their piece a lot more credible, because as sad as it is, no one wants, like, we are more likely to believe what you're saying when you have credible facts to it, right? Give me stats, give me articles by the Harvard Business Review, right? Give me something that has impact, has weight, if I may say so, right? So warrant, your warrant provides reasons or evidence that connects back to your claim, right? So again, like I said, my claim was that when we seek out validation, like seeking validation from others can cause us to put on like a persona of who we actually are to get validation. A warrant for that, my warrant for that was that basically when we get validation, it releases like a sense of dopamine in our brain, right? And for those that don't know, dopamine is like the sense of joy, right? Like the word I'm looking for. It's like a sense of joy. It's the hormone for joy in your brain, right? And when you get that, you want more, leading us to like want more validation. So we change our selves in order to get a lot more validation. I hope that makes sense, right? So your point is basically just saying why your claim is true, right? It's like me saying, plants are green. Why are plants green? It's because of the chlorophyll in them, right? So your warrant is basically just explaining why your claim is true or why we should think your claim is true. I think a very good way to like talk about your warrant is by using stats, pulling in quotes from like things like the Medium, Psych Central. Those are really good like places to go look for stats, just stats in general, facts, like articles are very good places to pull in warrants to support it. So you can use logic, you can use data, scientific examples, just really good examples of warrants. And warrants don't always have to be like, oh, according to the psychic review, 98%. No, a warrant can simply be a story, like a real life example of this issue, right? Tell us a story of someone that has faced this claim. If I said that poverty rates in the United States are starting to spike, right? Give me an example of a family that lives in Arkansas that has recently been like suffering from the impacts of poverty. Tell me their story because that then like explains to us why this claim is true because you're giving us a real life example of your claim in motion and then your impact. Your impact has to be one of the most important parts of this whole thing, right? Because this is the moment where you give your audience a reason to care. This is what signifies the like this is what highlights the significance of the entire argument, right? This is when you tell your audience, why should I care about this? What is the impact of the poverty rates like increasing in the United States, right? This is where you talk about your consequences and your call to action and your impact. This is just like the basic for building an argument. Your argument should have a claim. What are you trying to say? What is the message of what you're trying to say? It should have a warrant. Why is this claim true? What makes this claim true? An impact. Why does this claim matter? What is the impact of this claim? What is the significance of this claim? Why, as the audience, care? Why should we care at all? This is just like the base structure for when you're making your POI. I think it's very important to have all three of them in to properly communicate with your audience and inform them about your topic. Now, we're going to do an argument example, and I'm going to break down every single part. Claim, Black people in the United States face disproportionately harsher punishments in the prison system compared to their white counterparts. This is me, this is the message I'm trying to send. This is what I'm trying to argue about. This is the purpose of my piece, to communicate that Black people face harsher punishments compared to white people in the prison system. Then my warrants would be statistical data consistently shows that Black individuals are more likely to be arrested, convicted, and sentenced longer to prison terms than white individuals for similar offenses, right? Then we can go into the articles. According to the Pew Research Center, Black tends to have higher bail sets and receive lengthier and more punitive sanctions for such as incarceration, rather than probation compared to their white counterparts. So I have now put in actual research that I'm now using to back up the claim that I said that Black people are disproportionately face harsher punishments. The claim, my warrant, I pulled in stats to back up that claim. I told you why this claim is true, because there are stats that prove that this claim is true. Now, why is this important? Why should we care? What is the significance of Black people facing a harsher punishment in the prison system, right? When we as a society, like when Black people face like disproportionately harsher punishment, it undermines trust and fairness and integrity of the criminal justice systems, contributing to social unrest and inequality, right? So that is why my claim is true. So your warrant and your impact are just there to support your claim. They're there to make your claim more credible and tells your audience why we should care about your claim in the first place. Because if you spent 10 minutes trying to communicate like a point or your message, and at the end of it, your audience is still sitting there like, I don't care. I don't see a reason why I should care. Then you have not properly communicated. Because everything, if you care about it, you can make others care about it as well. You have that power. You have been given that opportunity to now bring it to a larger scale and communicate this and make other people care, right? So this is just a very good like way of making your POI. Okay, now we're going to watch an example video of someone I think who did this perfectly. And it does relate back to the argument example that we just watched. And I think Miriam did an amazing job. She was a finalist this past like national season, and she did a very good job at giving us her claim, her warrant, and her impact in this 10-minute performance. I'm gonna let it play so you guys can watch and like pick up little aspects of the warrants and the impacts in her claim.
Our third speaker, code 3664, with a program entitled The Game of Justice.
Welcome to the game of justice. The game where your fate is designed for you. Choose your character. I raised my kids on the story of David and Goliath. Now, David was this tiny little man, and he defeated this big old giant Goliath with some smooth little stones, all because he had faith in them. Faith. Ain't afraid of no giant man, and David knew that. That's why he wasn't afraid. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't even introduce myself. Hey y'all, I'm Lena Baker. A lot of people ask me why I choose to represent those on death row. People of color account for a disproportionate 43% of total executions in the United States, and 55% of those currently awaiting execution. Oftentimes I ask myself, if I don't represent them, who will? I go into jury duty tomorrow. You know what else was supposed to happen tomorrow? Oh, me and Sparky. We're our nails done. I mean, first you cancel our spa day, and now you want me to go and decide whether or not a minority is lying on trial? Currents flow through every vein. Each voltage a reminder of your fate. Guilty is your verdict, and your screams will clean your slate. Can you feel the electricity? Now, character chosen, Lena Baker. Selected. From the routine hanging of slaves for simply picking cotton too slowly, to the 1973 Tuskegee experimentations on Black men, to the present day, where Black bodies are being used as target practice, it is clear that Black lives are treated as a game in this white justice system. This is especially seen in the case of the death penalty, which has been used to execute copious amounts of innocent Black lives since its very creation. The Death Penalty Information Center reports that since 1973, there have been 186 exonerations of people put to death, only to be found innocent years later. Of those 186 innocent lives, 100 of them were Black. For too long, we have been forced to back this system that has done nothing but destroy us. And it is time that we, the jurors, the people, take our role seriously as we fight to win this game of life or death once and for all. Through the prose race and the death penalty from the ACLU, amusing jury duty stories found on Futher.com and Justice Game by E.J. Roth. The article's persistence of racism in the U.S. death penalty, methods of execution and innocence from the Death Penalty Information Center. The drama, The Lena Baker Story, and the poetry Corruption by Gabriel Ibakunle and Electrocution by Michael Gagain. The Game of Justice, a program, because Black lives cannot be respawned. And when the systems in place aim to treat us as nothing more than a simulation, we must learn how to beat the system.
Okay, I'm just gonna quickly pause it right there and break down the things we just watched. We just watched her teaser when she did the game character, right? And each game character had a different voice, correct? She did very different blockings to like I think she had like amazing blocking throughout this piece, using her binder as a puppy. That was mind-boggling. That was so smart. She did a very good job with the portrayal of Lena Baker. For those that don't know, Lena Baker is a real person, and that's why I'm gonna go into real quick. Lena Baker is her, like majority of her warrant here. Lena Baker is a real Black woman that was put on trial and unfortunately executed. She was the first Black woman to be executed. So her warrant in this story to explain why the game of justice for Black people in America is so skewered is by using a real life example of a victim of this skewered justice system, Lena Baker, who was a Black woman who was wrongfully put on trial and wrongfully executed. In her intro, she made it very important to explain her claim. This is what I'm going to be talking about for the next 10 minutes that you watch me, right? Then she talked about her warrant when she used stats, real stats that she researched to explain that majority of the Black people that were put on death row and that were executed with the death penalty were Black. This is real research that has been done and published in her warrant. Why is this important, right? When Black lives are used as games, like I'm gonna play that back so we can hear her last statements. That was her tagline. That is one of the most memorable parts of her entire piece. And I'm gonna play that one more time so we can hear it together. This is her impact, this is her timeline, and this is her giving us, the audience, a reason to care.
Treat us as nothing more than a simulation. We must learn how to beat the system. Our systems detect that your character poses a threat to the game. We will have no choice but to eliminate you. Our system detects that your character believes that we are withholding something from you. We assure you, this game is fair. I used to work on a mill for this man called Mr. Arthur. Mr. Arthur was a mean man, and he wasn't much for listening. Rule number 1, to win the game, you must choose the right character. Once you have selected a character, you cannot change their fate. I was walking into the courtroom when I saw the Black on trial. Automatically the room to rap music in the seat. I sit down and hold my dog close. This could get dangerous. The modern day death penalty is a direct descendant of slavery, lynching, and Jim Crow segregation. During slavery, capital punishment was a tool for controlling Black populations and curbing rebellion. Sometimes
Okay, I'm gonna pause again real quick. Do we all notice how she used historical facts to back up her claim? She brought in the topic of slavery, and she uses slavery to now back up the fact of Black people on the like penalty and like death row. You can also use scientific and historical evidence to support your argument. And I think that is a very unique way because not a lot of people do that. Most people just pull stats. But when you can use historical facts, I think it is so important to pull in those historical facts and scientific facts because it makes, again, your piece a lot more credible, right? Okay.
he locked me in that mill. It had to be about 500 degrees during the day. But he would make me drink till I didn't even know what day it was. And I'd tell him I have to leave. I have to get home to my children. And he'd say, there ain't nowhere you can run that I won't catch you. Rule number 2, some characters are born to die. If our systems detect your character poses a threat to the game, we'll have no choice but to eliminate you. a monster that refuses to die. A shame that lingers on, a menace to society, insulated against electrocution. Your people are a plague to be wiped out. The Supreme Court has never found a method of execution to be unconstitutional. There are 5 primary means in the United States: hanging, lethal injection, gas chambers, firing squads, and electrocution. But sometimes it is as simple as a verdict. Fear burns in my ears when the defendant says, I had been at the mill with Mr. Arthur for 3 days. It was Sunday, and I was supposed to go to church with my mama and my kid. But Mr. Arthur didn't want me to. He said he'd gonna kill me if I tried to leave, so I told him, why don't you just take the chain and the bar off the door so I can go home? All I want is to see my children. Mr. Arthur. Mr. Arthur, who is gonna feed my children? He grabs me and puts the gun to my face. And I told him, just do it. If you let me out the door, I ain't never coming back. We tossed over the gun. I shot him. I didn't mean to shoot him. I just wanted to come home. Characters like you were derived from hell, but you can't see it. Your mind is disguised to you as a daydream. Why is it that Black people have to fight to live? All these Black bodies drop in the name of justice, and we are forced to back this system that fails us every day. This courtroom does not know what justice is. System malfunction. I will repeat the rules one final time. Rule number 1, where if Purvis King's justice you cannot change, they Troy Davis, Larry Griffin. Rule number 2, Julius Jones, George Stinney, Eddie Howard. Lena Baker has been sentenced to death by electrocution for the murder of Elliot Arthur. Any last words? Have you ever heard the story of David and Goliath? Faith ain't afraid of no giant man, and David knew that. That's why he wasn't afraid. And neither am I. What I did in self-defense, or I would have been killed myself. Where I was, I could not overcome, but God has forgiven me. I'm ready to go. I am 1 in the number, and I have a very strong conscience. Isn't it funny how bodies like yours must burn to be free? We short-circuit your brain to keep the rest in check. 6 minutes. It took 6 minutes of electric shock to kill Lena Baker. 60 years after her execution, Lena Baker was officially pardoned by the state of Georgia. Character error. So you plan to win our system detecting your character was doomed from the start. But there is still time. Do you wish to win the game? Our lives are not a game to be won. We are not your test subjects, and we will not lose another heartbeat to your sadistic system. Because when the outcome is the death of innocent people, I refuse to play. We have to refuse to play. Threat detected. Erasing memory. There's not much time left. And in a second, you can be given a choice. A choice to let hatred win, or to stand by what's right and fight to make a change. We can always begin again. 1 case at a time. Choose wisely. Welcome to the game of justice. The game where your fate is designed for you. Choose your character.
Okay, so that was her performance. I think that was probably one of the best POIs I saw all year, and I was so glad she got to make it on that final stage because I did think that was a message that would have like was needed to be shared and communicated. And I think she did such an amazing job doing it. Something I will point out that I really like that she did that. And again, not a lot of kids do this, but when you can do this right, it makes such a difference and helps you stand out even more. Is when you give us a full circle moment. If you remember, she started off her piece with the robot character talking about this is the game of justice, and then she ended her piece with this is the game of justice. So it gives us a full circle moment, right? She did a very good job with her characterization. Her character and I don't know, the white lady, they never sounded the same. They never did the same things. They never walked the same or had the same facial expressions. She did a very good job in differentiating all her different characters. Her blocking, I think it's one of my favorite parts of blocking is when you are able to put such like tiny little details that make such a huge impact. And I didn't even catch this the first time I watched this. Every time she would go like this, she was on like an electrocute, like the electrocuting chair that like they had back in the day when like we used to electrocute people to death. But like she was symbolizing Lena Baker and how she was put on the electrical chair, right? So that little detail in her blocking took her performance to another level. Her calling out the names and the victim of Black people who have been put to death by this death penalty, like disproportionately, that were like the most of those cases ended up like being like forgiven by the state because they were falsified. So her calling out these victims is an example of her giving us warrant, giving us example of these cases, why her claim is true, because we have had actual real life victims go through these things, right? So that is, I think she has did an amazing job pulling in her warrant and explaining to us why this is true. So it doesn't seem like she's just pulling this out of nowhere and trying to make random things become true. No, she's giving us stats. She's giving us historical evidence. She's giving us the real life examples. And this is what drives a piece to be a lot more better. This is what makes a final performance stage. When you are able to properly communicate with your audience, inform your audience, and leave your audience with a feeling of, wow, I just learned something. Because if you're going to take 10 minutes out of my life, I need to learn something every time you perform, something I didn't know. Because a lot of times I think a lot of people think that, oh, because it's interp, you're just telling a story, but you're also informing people. You're teaching people. You are communicating with people, right? So every time you make a piece, there should be a message behind the piece, right? Your audience should be now informed of something they didn't know prior to. And that is now on you to do your research so you're properly ready and suitable to now teach an audience what you've now learned. Right. So that is all for our presentation today. I'm so thankful for all of you guys for showing up, and I would like to take questions if anyone has any. I see there's chats up here. If I can click them. But does anyone have questions? I would like if you can like unmute your mic and ask any questions that you'd like. If anyone has any.
Hello.
Hi.
I am planning to do my piece on chronic pain, and I was just thinking about I was had more of like a story format, um, and I was I was thinking about how to make a claim and argument for that, because in my area, I haven't seen a lot of like POIs like the one we just saw, where it's more of like a um, argument type. They're more like telling stories. Um, so I think that would be really interesting to work on. And I was just thinking about that.
Okay, yeah. That is a great like question. I will say, just because you have an argument doesn't mean you don't have a story, right? Those two things are not like oh, if you have an argument, you can't have a story. Because if we really watch back the performance we just watched, while she did have an argument, she also told us the story of Lena Baker at the same time, right? You can have a story with an argument with it. Honestly, a lot of books that you read will have an argument in it because without especially without a claim, your like book, your piece, your poem, your prose, it doesn't have a point if you don't have a message, right? So I don't think that should be something that's overly hard for you to get. So don't think those two things aren't like oh, if I have an argument, I can have a story. You can have both, and you can find arguments in a story, correct? And what was your POI about again? I didn't quite hear you broke out.
Oh, chronic pain.
Okay, now I'll ask you this: what about chronic pain?
Uh, well, I was specifically basing it off my experience. I'm using some of my medical records and having one of the characters be like a doctor. But I'm also including like some poetry and stuff from other people who've suffered from chronic pain. Uh, and yeah.
Okay. This is what I'm gonna ask you to do, right? This is what comes with making a good claim, right? I'm gonna go back to the claim slide so we can like revise what a claim is. A claim. It's a clear, concise statement that outlines your main position. So now that you said you want your piece to be about chronic pain. What about chronic pain? Is my piece going to be about, oh, chronic pain is good? Or is chronic pain a choice? Is that what your piece is going to be about? I want more like in-depth explanation and detail of what you want your piece to be about. Is chronic pain good? Are we gonna argue that chronic pain is mandatory, everyone should have chronic pain, or is chronic pain detrimental, or it's an argument? Give me something to argue with, right? So do you have an idea of what you want like your claim to be? What is the message that you're trying to send out to your audience about your POI?
Okay, thank you. Did you want me to answer the question?
I did. It's okay.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were just
Yeah.
like thinking about this.
No, yeah. If you have like an answer to that of what you want the
Yeah.
overarching message to be, please share.
I would liking thinking about the message to be like when when people who haven't had chronic pain meet someone with chronic pain, they often react a certain way. And maybe the message could be like, here's how you can treat someone with chronic pain in a way that's respectful to them.
Okay. So would you say, okay, because one of the most important part of your claim, it needs to be clear and concise, right? So can we just break that down and simplify it to be like, people with chronic pain, like people that don't have chronic pain, never experience the amount of like, I would say like trauma or effects that people like they undermine the pain that comes with chronic pain. Is that what you're trying to go with? That people that don't
Yeah.
have that condition will never understand what it's like?
Yeah.
Okay. So then I think that's a really good claim. I honestly think that's a very good and interesting POI topic because it's not something that I've seen, like it's not very common. It's gonna stand out. And then your warrant. Your warrant can be again your medical records. That would make such an interesting warrant to see like your personal medical record. It's something you can relate to, and I think that would make such a good claim, right? So do you have any more questions that you'd like to ask about that claim? Because I could go further in and like help you figure out each and every aspect of building this argument up.
I think that's something I'll work with my coach, but I really appreciate that advice.
Yeah. Does anyone else have any other questions, or concerns or things they would just like to say about their piece that they're working on? Because the competition season is starting to come up, and I know a lot of us are starting to like piece together or think about what we want our POIs to kind of be about. So does anyone have any other questions, comments, or concerns, or things like they would like to know more of?
Yes, actually. So I'm taking my POI. I've changed this topic like a million times, but the one that I've come to is I've performed in like local music scenes like pretty much my entire life. And it's very evident that women get treated differently in music.
You're always assuming, especially if you're young, like people always assume that you don't know what you're talking about and you don't know what you want. And then you end up sounding bad because they don't listen to you. And so
Okay.
misogyny in music has always been a big like part of my life, I guess. So I wanted to like intertwine like the music and the POI pretty closely because it's going to be about misogyny in music. So what is the best way to weave in like song? Do you need to do like one part of a song and do it several times throughout the piece, or have different lyrics of the same song throughout it?
Okay. I think that is a very good question, right? And this is something I've seen before. If anyone knows what debate like a girl is, it's kind of like that, but like in the speech and debate community, when people sing in pieces, I would strongly advise you don't let your song overpower the actual essence of your piece, right?
Gotcha.
It's a
Yeah.
yeah, it's like it should not overpower the entire essence and the captivity of your piece. And I think that is such a smart and creative idea for especially your piece, since it's gonna be about like the music industry, to weave in songs. That would be amazing, right? But with every piece, I will give you a tip right now. Do not make those song bits too long because then it becomes draining. Then it becomes, oh, she's doing the same character. She's been doing the same character for like the last 2 minutes. We don't need to hear the full song. So if we could just get like a clip, like I would say like 20 seconds of a song and just cut it up, split it up. Or for something I've seen before, you sing a song in the beginning and then you end with that same song, right? For those that don't know, I don't know if you guys have seen Isabella Royer's 2023 performance. Can you hear Heart Screams? She starts off by singing
Yes.
song,
Yeah.
and then she ties that song back in again. And I think that's such a beautiful way to encapsulate music into your piece. And I think that would be wow, that is such a creative idea. Round of applause for you. But yeah, if I could give you a tip with the music, is because a lot of times when kids do pieces like that, they want to sing the full song to get the full emotion and the full message of the song. No, don't do please don't sing the entire song. It becomes boring. It becomes like, okay, we're gonna sit here and listen to her sing this full song for a good 2 minutes. You're eating up time, right? So I would say look at the lyrics, pick out the most important parts of the song that you want, like this part is the most important part, and sing it, right? So you sing it like let's say in your teaser, you should sing it. And I don't know if I've mentioned this before. Um, very, very important, all of your characters that you're going to show in the next 10 minutes need to be previewed in the teaser, right? Because again, your teaser is just a taste of what this POI is going to look like. So if I'm eating up your POI, I don't want to be surprised at minute 8 when this random character just jumps out at me and I don't know who this person is, right? I don't want to be eating a salad and find a piece of bone in it because I wasn't properly introduced to this character before. So any character that you want to perform in, like you want to be in your piece, should be introduced from minute 1. It should not be a sneaky surprise that we meet later along the line. So if you were planning on singing, I would honestly suggest singing somewhere in your teaser. Whether it's the start, I think it's best if honestly you started with a song because it's a good way to like catch your audience attention, like, oh, she's singing, especially if you can sing good. That is a very good way to just draw your audience in. You can start off your teaser with a song. You can end your teaser with your song. You can end your like your actual piece with the song. You can end the overall piece. It's just there's so many ways to do it. Just don't make it overpowering. You should not be singing like a full minute of a song at
Gotcha.
all. Yeah, like ever. But yeah, I think that is such a creative idea of what to do. That's so creative. Wow, that sounds like such an interesting like POI. But does anyone else have any other questions that they'd like to ask?
Yeah, hi, thank you for your presentation. I just have a question about the amount of characters in a play. Like, I guess Leif Carlson this year, he had like 7 or 8 different characters, or even Isabella Royer's Pulse. Both of them were both incredible, but I just want to ask you, like, how many characters do you recommend in a piece?
Ooh, this is a really good question. And honestly, I would say it depends on the individual, right? For a lot of people, I would advise not to bite off more than you can chew, right? Because you can't compare yourself. Because Bella has been doing this for a pretty long time, right? I would hate for anyone to see something on the national final stage because this is something I used to do where I would watch something on the final stage and be like, no, I have to do exactly what they did. Do not bite off more than you can chew. In my last year's POI, I had like 7 characters because that was what I could handle. Well, I've seen POI that had like 15. Okay. Some of these kids are just amazingly talented. If you have like 3 characters that you can do well and you can differentiate them, that's good enough. You're not being judged based on the amount of characters you're doing. It's quality over quantity, 100%. So if you know you can only do 2 characters and you can do that perfectly, go with it. Run with it. There is not a minimum amount of characters that you can do because I would hate for you to think that, oh, I have to do like 7 characters for me to have a good POI. And then you do the 7 characters and they all sound the same or have different, like the same like format or just sucky, right? It's always going to be quality over quantity, right? So I do think a good starting base for a lot of kids are just like starting off in POI because I understand like characterization can be is really tough. I think even I low key like mess up my characterization sometimes and my characters start to blend together. I would say a good starting base is 3, right? One of them can be yourself in your regular talking voice when you're giving us the facts. I told you before, like a good Southern accent. Everybody can do a Southern accent. And I think a Southern accent is just an easy way to just go in and out of what you got to say. You know, a little, I think that's very good. And then we can have a nerd. It's just different characters. And I think a good way, especially for me, when learning how to do my characters, was to find someone who I wanted my characters to be like. Right. So in my last year's POI, I played Oprah Winfrey as one of my characters. So I watched a lot of Oprah interviews to see the way she talked. And I just emulated that. I copied that as one of my characters. Your characters don't need to be this overly fascinating. Like they can be normal people. If you want to play Bill Gates, go ahead and play Bill Gates. He's still a character that you are playing because he's not you. So I do think a good starting base for someone that's just starting POI to have that flexibility and ability to have different stories. I think 3 should be a really good starting base. But again, if you think you can do a lot more than 3 and you can play them off good, go ahead. Right? Everyone's different. Everyone has their strength and their weaknesses. But I think 3 should be a good doable base for like beginners if you're just now starting. Yeah?
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah. Does anyone have any other questions that they'd like to ask?
Um, what are some tips for finding like good poetry? Poetry has always been the most difficult thing to find because you look up a poem and like 90% of it, I feel like, are just like self-proclaimed writers on like internet forums, and the poetry isn't really quality.
Okay. I actually find that really surprising that you said that because every time I'm always doing my POI, I think the hardest thing for me to find is prose. Like I can never
Actually,
find prose anywhere. Yeah, but for poetry, I used to do poetry. Like I do poetry. So finding poetry for me is not always really hard. I would recommend things like button poetry. Slam poetry works really well in your climax. I love using slam poetry as my climax because they always have so much emotion to them, right? I would advise honestly just go on YouTube and type in poems about sexism. You will find something. Trust. You will find something. Go to the library page, like Library of Congress. Look up poetry books. I think that's a really good one. Like to like find poetry is to find poetry books. Poetry books about sexism. Poetry books about women in the industry. Poetry books about women in general, right? Because poetry books are collections of different poems. And I think that's a good resource to just find individual poems when you read like a book. Because I will say a good amount of poetry that I have found through like a collection of like poetry books. I own a lot. But if you're looking for a short, sweet way, just go on YouTube and type in poems about, if I want to make a POI about gun violence, poetry about gun violence, poetry about school shootings, poetry about gun laws, right? That's just, I would say, the easiest and quickest way to find poetry is by going on YouTube because they are a lot of YouTube channels that post like poetry, and they're never like really big authors or anything, they're like really like niche, a lot more niche. So if you're looking for the little grainy details, you will find some of them in these YouTube poems that I watch. A really good author that I would recommend to everyone that does poetry, because I think he does like a variety of different type of poem. His name is Rudy Francisco. If you know, you know. He covers so many different genres of poetry, and he does a really good job at covering them as well. So yeah, just finding poetry online, just look it up. Like I don't think it's something, because there are a lot of poetry. But like if you're trying to go into the niche aspects of poetry, find an overarching topic and look for poetry books about that overarching topics. Because 9 times out of 10, you will find something like that. Right? If I wanted to find poems about sexual assault, if I look up poetry about women, unfortunately, like poetry books about women, unfortunately, there is bound to be like a poem about sexual assault in there somewhere. Trust. I know that because I've actually looked up those poetry, and like The Sun and Her Flowers by Ruby Kaur, even though it is like a woman poetry book, they're like, does that make sense? Just take a zoom out, find an overarching topic. Like for yours, I would say misogyny and sexism, right? And just look up poetries for that. So it's like a funnel. You start off big and something that's very common, and then you narrow it back in. Because if you're trying to find poetry about something as niche as sexism in the music industry, I think that's going to be very hard for you to find. I think it'd be easier for you to like base that aspect of like the sexism in the music industry in general, and like articles and stories and real life stories that you find, because you probably be able to find stuff like that. But like again, when it comes to poetry, it's very hard to find very niche topics. So my suggestion would just to take a zoom out and then look for topics, like look for poems that cover the overarching topic of it. Yeah?
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah. Does anyone else have any other questions they'd like to ask?
Could you repeat the name of that poet you mentioned a minute ago?
His name is Rudy Francisco.
Okay, thank you.
A lot of
I
books.
also have another question. Uh, if you have like a lot of content, how would do you have any tips on like organizing the content in a way that isn't like boring? Like, I know having character changes is important, and not having it be too slow paced, but I also don't want it to be chaotic and hard to follow. Do you have any tips on that?
Okay, yes. I think that's a very good question. I not even what I hate POIs are very hard to follow. I do suggest again quality over quantity. It doesn't matter if you have 15 good sources, but you don't actually get to sit down and explain and get into the nitty gritty of these sources. Rather you just having like 5 sources and you're able to properly explain and communicate those 5 sources properly. I will say to when you're trying to like communicate and you don't want it to be chaotic, when you have a lot of characters and you're playing a lot of different characters, it will become chaotic. Whether you're good at characterization or not, if you're constantly bringing out new characters, it's going to get chaotic and hard to follow. That's why I say you find the characters that you are really, really good at and you stick with them. If you think you can do 5 characters perfectly and those 5 characters are able to finish and properly explain the whole story, stick with those 5 characters. You don't need 15 characters to have a good POI, because the more characters you add, the more like stories you're adding in, right? And then it becomes chaotic when we're listening to 5 different stories in one POI in 10 minutes. Yeah. I would say again, quality over quantity. You pick what's important and then you go with it. You don't want to bore these people. We want to have a 10-minute performance that is like easy to understand and is entertaining. If you are able to entertain your audience, you've gotten the one. If you are able to teach your audience and entertain them in those 10 minutes, you've won the tournament, because this is what this event is meant for, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I guess kind of a follow up for that. Sometimes it's hard for me to know like when to make switches in pace. Because, like if I have like, like say I have 3 sources that I'm using, I obviously don't want to do all of one source and then all of the next source and then all of the third and then be done. And you want to kind of like mix it up a bit. But sometimes it's hard for me to know like when to stop and what parts to put where in terms of like organizing it. Does that make sense?
Yes, that does. That makes a lot of sense. I would say my biggest tip for that, number one, you're right. You don't want to sit there and just spread one source and then go to the next source and then the next source. I would say my biggest tip for that is a lot of sources come in like paragraphs. I cut by paragraphs, right? Because if an author is putting something in like two different paragraphs, it probably means they're telling us two different parts of the story. So I cut it like that. I use sentences as like my transitions. Let me try to find, I'm actually going to share my POI from last year so we can like have an idea of how I cut it, because if anyone is chaotic, I promise you it's me. Okay, I can get pretty chaotic with my cutting, but I find that when you cut a specific way, and I'm not saying you have to cut the way I cut, but your cuttings don't need to be long. They don't need to be overly long. You don't want to sit there and just spread one source. So I'm going to explain to you how I cut my pieces and how I cut my piece from last year. Okay, it's this one. I know it's such a boring title. Okay, so I'm gonna show you how I start like to weave my pieces together. I'm gonna highlight every piece and when it starts to change. This is gonna be yellow. Every time you see yellow, this is gonna be Oprah. The children's book is gonna be orange. And I'm just gonna do this for my teaser so we don't sit here highlighting every single like thing, right? This is the children's book. These are articles. Oh my lord. These are just written like articles that I've picked out. This was a poetry, so I'm gonna put it in blue. This is gonna be purple. Yes. It's also gonna be this type of blue. Okay. Okay, so now that everything's highlighted, I'm gonna start breaking out each different color. So the yellow ones are Oprah Winfrey. I watched like her actual show, and I took parts of her show because I thought they worked for my piece. So it starts off with Oprah Winfrey and then feeds into a children's book. Do you guys know The Bad Case of Stripes? That's what this is.
I love that book.
And it was the first time I read it was when I was making my POI. Amazing book. I still read it sometimes. Love it. This was an article from the Medium that I found. This was a poetry. This was a poetry I found, right? This was from a play. It's called Permutations. It's from this bigger play, like the Colored Museum. This was from a play. This was from another article, like Psych Central or something. Sorry, this is another poetry, a completely different poetry. This is Maya Angelou, for those that don't know. And this is the continuation of this previous poetry up here. And these are all the characters I play within my piece, right? So I think the way I do these are just by paragraph. So Camilla Clean, like this was literally the first page of the book. This was literally the first page of the book that I just took out. Camilla Cream loved lima beans, but she never ate them. See, all her friends hated lima beans, and Camilla was always worried about what others thought about her. That was an entire paragraph I found in the piece. I was like, oh, that works perfectly. Just take it, right? I cut by paragraphs. I don't go in and start doing one line. This line goes, this, I don't, because when you constantly change your characters by lines, it becomes chaotic, it becomes confusing. So I would say do it by paragraphs, right? Each character should spend, I would say, around 15 to 30 minutes, not minutes, seconds on each character before you need to change. I would never advise going over a minute for a character. It becomes boring, it becomes repetitive. Does that make sense? So I would advise doing 15 to 30 seconds of each character. And all my characters come in a circle. They all come in a circle, right? So I start off, like one of my beginning ones is Camilla Cream. So when I finish my intro, right, the first thing I go back into is Camilla Cream, right? It's
Mhm.
almost in the same order as when I first started it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. So I keep them all in the same order. So if you go through my POI, the way this color pattern looks right now, that's how majority of my color pattern is going to look as you go down and you see like continue to go through the piece, right? Because then it's easier for you to understand rather than just switching what you did last at the beginning, just moving the pieces around. When you set a structure, it's best if you just keep following that structure, right? And that's when you get that circle back moment, when you circle everything back, right? Does that make sense?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I just hope that made sense. I know I'm like really like weird when it comes to
No, you're good. Yeah, that made
that,
very much sense.
how I cut. But if you feel like my way of cutting isn't like makes like you can always do your own thing. I think it's so like amazing when kids are creative and find new ways to bring something new to this event. I love that. So if you think you can find a better, even better way of cutting your piece and making it not chaotic, go with it. Okay. This is something that brings out each and our like individual creativity. And if you find something that works better, girl, do it. Okay.
Okay, thank you so much.
Does anybody else have any other questions they'd like to ask? Questions, comments, and concerns?
One more
Uh,
question real quick. Oh, sorry. Um,
you're good.
are there any like authors or pieces in general that are overdone that you need to stay away from, or is everything kind of fair game?
Okay, I do have some, but here's my thing. Here's my outlook on things. A lot of pieces that are done in speech, probably everyone has probably used it at some point. Okay? Here's the thing. I'm not the first person to ever use Maya Angelou in their POI. I'm not. I'm really not. That's the thing. And that's the beauty of this event, honestly, is that two people can have the exact same piece and do it so differently, right? That's where the interpretation aspect comes in. Because you can have the exact same piece and do it completely differently, right? Because I've seen a girl do this exact same piece, but we did it so differently. Not the same POI, just the Maya Angelou part, right? This like we wear the mask that grins and lies, right? She did it as a teacher. She was teaching a class and she was teaching little kids that we wear a mask that grins and lies. And when I did it, I played a monster. I put on this scary voice because I was a monster that was masking myself, right? So I take my binder like it was a mask and I was like, and beware, in the really scary voice. I don't know why I did that. It was something I thought that was really cool. So I never honestly think anything overdone. It's only overdone where you start copying the way other people interpret something else. That's the beauty of this event. You will almost never see two pieces that are done the exact same way unless they're copying someone, right? Unless they're literally sitting there just copying other people, you will almost never see two pieces that are exactly the same. Therefore, it cannot be overdone because everyone that does that piece is doing it in a completely different way. They're interpreting it in a completely different way. I'll give you an example. This last year I went to do duo at the NSDA tournament, and I think it was one of my quarters round. I watched Donnie Darko, like the duo Donnie Darko that champed like 2019. I watched same piece, right? It was very, very similar, but they did it so differently. While the cutting were a bit similar, their blocking, their interpretation, the story, like the message, what they were trying to say were two completely different things. And I think that is the beauty of interp events, right? No one can you can like it's all in here. They can steal your piece, they can do the same piece that you do, but they can never steal your individuality and your creativity, right?
Thank you.
Yeah. So I think that is that's my favorite part of this event, is just honestly doing stuff that like is valuable to you, right? No one is ever going to be Rachel. No one is ever going to be able to see what's in here. No one has the creativity that you have. No one has the brain that you have, right? So that's the beauty of this event. Everyone can do the same piece, but no one is ever going to do the same piece the exact same way you did it, because we all think differently. We all have different ways to do different things, right? So if I wouldn't honestly say to stay clear of any piece. If you find a poem that works for you and it's been done before, do it. Just do it. If I was, I think that would only like be a problem if it wasn't like a DI or an HI where it's the exact same piece. Because again, it's just one compared to when POI is just multiple different pieces. And because POI is like multiple different pieces, there's no way someone's just gonna copy like your piece word for word unless they like copy that you can get someone disqualified for. But like the only thing I would really recommend is like the DI or HI aspect or duo where you only have one script, then I can say people tend to like overdo certain scripts a lot. But when it comes to POI and it's multiple different, pieces and stuff, it's very rare that I see someone do the exact same piece with the exact same blocking, with the exact same interpretation, right?
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so is that enough of an answer for you, or do you want
Yes, absolutely.
okay. Does anyone else have any other questions they'd like answered, or comments, or like like if they need help with anything else?
I do.
Hi, what's your
Hi.
question?
How would you cite movies or videos or TV shows?
Okay, so in my POI, I do use BoJack Horseman in my POI, like this POI that we just did. I did use BoJack Horseman in my POI. And when I'm gonna pull out where I just sourced it. Okay. So for plays, I just say from the play, the Colored Museum. When you talk about shows, you say the drama series, BoJack Horseman. When you talk about movies, the drama, the name of the movie, right? You never say the episode. You don't say the episode, you say the show itself. You don't need to specify what episode you got it from. Correct? You only need to specify that if you're like getting challenged or someone's about to disqualify you or something. That's when you bring up like, oh, it's on this episode on this season, and you have the transcript out. But when you're talking about like TV shows, you just talk about, oh, from the drama series of BoJack Horseman, the drama series of The Vampire Diaries, the drama, like the movie. You can even say the movie. No one's ever gonna clock you for your sources ever, unless your sources are not real. No one's gonna be like, oh my god, she says she got that from a movie. Fire her immediately. No one's gonna do that. No one's doing. And most times, not gonna lie, your judges don't really care about your sources. It's just something we do out of respect for the authors, and like it's like make sure no one's cheating. Your judges are not gonna sit there and nitpick all your sources. And if they're doing that, I don't know what to tell you. They're like really into it then. But like your sources are one of the most boring parts of your piece. But like we should be more focused on your introduction and why this piece is important not only to you but to us, rather than we should your sources. The sources is just really there for like, cheating purposes and like to show credit for the authors that you got your pieces from. Does that make sense? Did I answer your question, Landon?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Does anyone else have any other questions they like answered?